I was just running, sort of sprinting in a training session, and then felt like almost a pop, almost like a small explosion in the top of my right quad. Knew something was wrong, but I'd never really done any sort of soft tissue. I never really had any soft tissue injuries before, so didn't really think it or know how bad it could be, was found out, I guess, a week or so later that it was pretty bad, and my top of my rec fem, so the top of the quad, middle muscle in the quad, the tendon was snapped in half basically.
Josh's injury was to his rectus femoris, or rec fem, which is one of the four muscles that make up the quadricep group. So he basically, his injury mechanism was a sprint-based mechanism. So he was sprinting at the start of a training session, felt a kind of a popping sensation at the top of that quad, and that ended up being scanned a day or so later and leading to the diagnosis, which was a pretty decent tear of that rec fem muscle. One of the jobs of that muscle within sprinting, and especially in someone that runs as quickly as Josh does, is it has to kind of undo all of the work that's done by those really strong, powerful hip extensors to pull the leg back through again, recover that leg so that Josh can then take his next stride. Because Josh is he's a big, strong, powerful player. We know he's very quick and very dynamic. He actually produces really high amounts of torque through his hip extensors. He covers a lot of ground with each stride, and that's one of the key tools for him that makes him so quick and dynamic. So his rec fems and his hip flexors in general have to do a really high amount of work, because they have to undo all of that kind of torque that he creates during hip extension to pull that leg back through.
So we're looking for Josh here to pull through from his hip flexor basically. So trying to encourage him not to overcompensate by rounding his lower back, rounding too much through that thoracic and mid-back portion as well. He's holding himself at the end, so he's keeping a decent amount of tension on the muscle. And then what I was just talking him through was trying to keep his foot position nice and low as he's pulling through, so he's not kicking up to the sky and then pulling through and using other structures. So we're really trying to get that rec fem, that injured tissue to work. So he's keeping that foot low, pulling through, basically putting you into an acceleration specific angle and an acceleration specific position basically. Yeah.
The first phase after the operation, Josh would have worked really closely with the physios, and in particular Chris. So that kind of first phase is really all geared around how do we maximise the healing process, how do we start to return Josh to normal ranges at the hip, can we begin loading that in an early and safe manner within ranges that are going to be protected and not apply too much strain to that muscle and that tendon. And then as Josh goes through that process, we then start to load that tendon and that muscle tendon unit more at a longer length, because ultimately that's where we need to get him to as an end goal to create the adaptations that we want to. So we need that muscle tendon unit to be really nice and strong at those longer lengths, because that's what it has to go through when Josh is back into those sprinting type activities. And then off the back of that, we're then looking at the work we're doing with Josh in the gym, checking around any sort of if he's having any adverse reactions to those kind of stimuluses that we're applying to him. And then there's really the kind of regression and progression of our pitch-based actions with Josh as well, which really is all about returning him to high-speed running and those explosive activities. So doing a little bit of assessment work with some filming and some kinematic analysis of Josh's running gait, seeing how that progresses over time and as we increase the speed of the work that Josh is doing as well. And then really a lot of this stuff is for me is knowing the person that you're working with and having the kind of relationship to have that two-way dialogue for them to report back in as well, which is really easy when it's someone that's pretty diligent and knows himself and has been around this kind of process for a long period of time, as Josh was. So he made that side of things quite easy.
When I get my hip through,
yeah,
but even that tightens both,
yeah.
Without even doing anything. Yeah. But it just feels like they're both working. Because I'd never had much sort of serious soft tissue or soft tissue injuries really in the past, I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I knew it felt bad and it was painful, so I kind of thought it could be a bad one. But in my mind, I probably thought, maybe a month, maybe month and a bit max, and I'll be all right. It can't be that bad, sort of thing. So you can't. It's hard not to, but you can't sort of catastrophize and think, oh well, that's me done for, because that'll slowly sort of break you. I guess trying to stay as positive as I could, but like you say, the timing of it was frustrating, given that I hadn't even played a game this season when it was. So yeah, it's hard not to immediately think, oh, this could be a long one, sort of thing. Throughout the whole process, I tried not to let myself get too happy or too sad about it. So tried to keep everything quite matter of fact, and this is what's happened, this is the best way to sort of get back. I mean, and then I think that served me well in the rehab process, in terms of you're going to have highs, you're going to have lows, but not sort of getting too high when things go well, and then not getting too low when inevitably things don't go exactly to plan. That kind of helped me keep a pretty even keel throughout the process, and yeah, it meant that I was always working towards that next sort of box to tick and never got sort of too far ahead of myself. I think being a rugby player is part of it is understanding that you're not always going to be out there playing. It's part of the game. There's going to be periods in your career, unless you're incredibly fortunate, when you're going to spend time on the sideline, whether that be through form, injury, whatever it is. What made me incredibly proud, I guess, is being able to go into the boxes, do hospitality and commercial duties before, and hear how the sponsors, the fans were absolutely loving how the boys were playing. That gave me an incredible sense of happiness, and I've really sort of gained a much more holistic understanding of the club as a whole, and our position within the city, and just how much rugby means to this place. And no, it's definitely, I think, broadened my understanding of how much rugby means, and yeah, we're not just doing it for each other, but it gives a hell of a lot of people a lot of joy watching us perform and play well and pull that jersey on to represent not just ourselves or the staff or whoever works here, but the whole city, really.
And Josh Bayliss, first game of the season for him back from injury. Welcome, maybe overdue return after a frustrating thigh injury. To do one of the things he enjoys most. Affairs.
When someone comes back from one of these longer term injuries, and I guess the longer that kind of injury timeline and that rehab timeline is, the keener we probably are to accumulate time in full training before that player then goes and kind of returns himself back into that kind of playing position. That does a couple of things. Number one, it helps that player become technically and tactically ready to go through that process again and put on that Bath jersey and go and represent the club and do so to a high level. Number two, it shows the coaching staff that they're ready and gives confidence in the coaching staff that Josh is able to actually go and deliver exactly what Johan would want in terms of delivering against his demands of the game model. So that's kind of the big thing within that process. Josh accumulating that time back in training, and then conversations largely between Rory, our head of medical, and Johan, in terms of making sure that there's been no adverse reaction to that kind of exposure into full training, and then seeing how Josh is performing within those training sessions and making sure that everybody's happy for him to be on the pitch.
I didn't really ever think about it until the week before, I think maybe Gloucester. Johan called me and said, I might play you this week. I didn't end up playing, but that was the only time I'd really thought, because I was so engrossed in getting myself back fit, that I'd never even let myself think about playing again. That was the first time I thought, oh right, okay, I could be back here, which is obviously the physios guys were targeting a game. I had a game in mind that I'd want to get back for, but that was really a conversation we had early on, and I kind of just parked that and said, right, well, that'd be great if I make it for then, but I'm just going to try as hard as I can to get back fit and get back as soon as I can. And then when I got to run out the wreck against Racing, I mean, couldn't really have been a cooler experience to come back for and to play a part in. There wasn't sort of any part of me that didn't feel ready for the game or didn't feel prepared or didn't feel... There's obviously going to be that slight bit of anxiousness going into your first game. It's a long time I hadn't played for, but as soon as I was out on the pitch, I just sort of felt my way back into it, and it felt brilliant. I definitely had a sense of real, I guess, accomplishment after that wrestling game, but then certainly after the Toulouse game, where I sort of played the whole game, and to get through a game like that against a team like that, and feel like my leg was good and I wasn't too far off the pace, so that was sort of really happy for me. I was, despite the loss, for me personally, I just felt like it was really nice to get through that game and to put my hand up for the whole 80 and not worry about the previous injury, really.
When the lads exit rehab, they go back onto their kind of player watch with their player watch physical performance coach. So Josh works really closely with Jack. And there'll be threads that have been kind of explored within Josh's rehab that will remain in his programme to make sure that, again, those structures and those tissues remain healthy, they remain robust, and we're putting Josh in a position where he's confident in those structures and those tissues that he can continue going and doing what he needs to do. Because I guess the issue with once someone has had a significant injury, that is one of the biggest risk factors that then predisposes them to further injury in the future. It's our job to make sure that we put the right tactics in place to make sure that that doesn't happen.